Thank you for inviting me for this occasion. And I am sorry that I could not participate in person for the conference. So at least now I can join in cyberspace. And I had chosen the topic marginalized women in the lives of the Chandragupta Rajavamsa because I believe that when we talk of marginalization, we have to realize that man or woman has not changed at all over the last several thousand years. So by learning from what had happened in the past, I think we can take cue of how we could demarginalize the situation today and how women can escape marginalization today. So women had been marginalized from the day they themselves drew a Lakshman Rekha around them. I believe that when human beings started walking on two legs, it was nature that domesticated the women first, tempting them to settle down in some location which provided food, water, and shelter. Then she domesticated man because she needed protection, mostly probably from other men, and the support. Unfortunately, she gave up her role as the head of the household. As an example of the marginalization of women, let me discuss the well-known characters identified as the Maurya dynasty or the Chandragupta Rajavamsa. We do not have any reliable details of the mother of the character we know as Chandragupta. He is reported to have married a daughter of Seleucus Nicator, named Swarnakshi. However, she is known by other names in other writings. And his first wife is said to be Duradhara, mother of Bindusara. But the confusion arises when we come across the names Theodora, Helena, and other women. So we don't know how many women he had in his harem and how many he had kept as his wives legally. And Bindusara could be the son of any one of these women or just any other woman in the harem of Chandragupta. Then there are also references that Duradhara was the daughter of Dayananda, which could mean she was not of Greek. We do not have any information about Chandragupta's birth or about his mother, and Romila Thapa considers him to be a Vaisya. His mother could also have been a Sudra woman and a courtesan of the Nanda king. So Bindusara is accepted as the father of Ashoka and son of Chandragupta. But Ashoka does not mention his father or mother in any of his inscriptions. According to Ashokavadana, Bindusara's wife was Subhadrangi, while Vamsatta Prakashini calls her Dharma. If he had sired 101 sons and probably another 100 daughters, it could mean he would have enjoyed the pleasure of about 30 or 40 women or more. If there was no historical character called Bindusara, trying to identify women in his life is a futile exercise. And also, he could not be the father of Ashoka. The women in Ashoka's life are more complicated, but we have some information about them, with at least two of them mentioned in his inscriptions. King Ashoka's consorts are mentioned in many historical and religious writings over the past 2 millennia, which also had enriched South Asian literature. Even if Ashoka had been a ruler in the Indian subcontinent and his grandfather was Chandragupta, we don't know who his grandmothers were, either paternal or maternal, or if Ashoka knew them. We do not know about his relationship with his mother, or if he received his mother's care and love, if he was one more child in the palace among many offspring of Bindusara's uh, kingdom. It had been, if he had 100 brothers, and probably a similar number of sisters. He would have grown up among all the women in his father's harem, and with so many young girls, many of them probably his half sisters. We have so many confusing and contradictory stories, and we have even less information about Bindusara than we have of his father or his son. If there had ever been a historical Bindusara, it would have been difficult to talk about his son. Ashokavardhana does not mention Ashoka's mother's name, but mentions that she was a Brahmin girl who was gifted to Bindusara and introduced into his harem. And this is a very sad development if it had really happened, where influential people gifted their daughters to the king, just like they would gift some material object. And we had no information about any other young girls who had been gifted to Ashoka or to his father and grandfather. Gifting young girls to royalty, if it had been the practice in Magadha society, shows the pathetic situation of the women of the time. And because the Mahavamsa, Sri Lankan chronicle, which had written very much later, linked Ashoka with the son and daughter, Lord Mahinda and Sangamitra. And this Ashoka Tissa connection, there is no archaeological evidence about it. But if we believe the legend, then Bindusara made him a viceroy at Avanti, a region in Ujjain. It is interesting to note that Ashoka at that time was known as a heartless general, and that was precisely the reason why he was sent to Avanti. However, even the heartless general is supposed to have fallen in love with a common girl and married her. The girl was none other than Samrat Ashoka's first wife, Maharani Devi. But if he abandoned the woman with two children after becoming king, then he had continued to be heartless. There is also legends that Ashoka was very ugly to look at and his skin was so repulsive. And it is doubtful if a daughter of a rich merchant or any of the other queen's consorts agreed to cohabit with him. Is a question we should ask ourselves. If Devi had been a woman acquired for his harem, we could understand his giving in to the king's demands, but not a free woman. So Ashoka, only as a young prince, this woman had agreed to live with him, which means that she had been just another woman in Ashoka's life. But we don't know her real name. Devi could not have been the name of a girl at the time. But literature still calls her Vedisha Mahadevi Sakya Kumari. We don't know whether she was of Shakya origin or whether she was, and all this came up. And in some of the inscriptions, there is confusion, and Harifok translates the Panguraria inscription as Piyadasi living together with his unwedded wife. And that was the situation of supposed to be his first queen or first wife. Then we have another woman called Karuaki. And it's a very interesting possibility that Karuaki was also Vedisha Devi because we don't know Devi's name. And if that was so, if Karuaki was the first queen or first wife, then that means Ashoka had kept the Vedisha Devi only as a mistress when he was at Ujjain. And there is another legend about Karuaki. which says that Ashoka invaded Kalinga, being infatuated by the beauty of Karuvaki, the fiancée of the crown prince of Kalinga. And he had taken her by force or by consent or whatever. And the other legend is that Rani Karuvaki was a daughter of a fisherman. But anyway, she is supposed to have become the queen and was the mother of Tivala or Tivara, who later became the viceroy of Taxila. And both names are mentioned in his inscriptions. Then the other woman we hear is Padmavati. Nothing much is known about Rani Padmavati except the fact that she was the mother of Ashoka's son Kunal. Padmavati died very early, and so it is also not known whether the marriage was out of love or a political alliance. Though Kunala was younger than both Mahendra and Tivala, he was seen as Ashoka's heir. This makes us believe that Rani Padmavati would definitely be from a royal background and would have been next in line after Devi and Karuval. Then we have the name Asandhimitra. Then the maid had pointed out the stove wish that she might become the royal spouse of the first and desired the lovely form of the limbs of perfect outline. And Asandhimitra, with limbs of perfect outline, became the next queen or next mistress or whatever we call it. Ashoka's fourth marriage was, if it was a marriage, was an imperial decision after he became the third Samrat of the Mauryan dynasty. This time he married a princess with invisible joints. So that means all the other women before that had been just common people in his regime. And this Asandhimitra took care of the Prince Kunal ever since he was a little boy. And then we had a sad situation. His next consort or wife or whatever was Tishrakshita. She created a lot of problems. She was the one who destroyed the sacred Mahabodhi or Bodhi tree. Then those are the only information we have about Ashoka's consorts, his wives and all. We have one mention of one of his daughters. One of the daughter-in-laws, it is the name Kanchana Mala, the wife of Prince Kunal. But all the three kings, they were kings, they had harems. Ashoka admits he spends a lot of time in his harem, which could mean he had many women as his consorts. In addition to the few women mentioned in literature, perhaps as many women as his father, who would have cohabited with so many then. And there is also a story that Ashoka burned 500 women of his harem because he was angry with them. He was angry with them when he noticed that the women had cut down the Ashoka tree, all the branches, all the flowers in the Ashoka tree. And Ashoka had not hesitated to burn all the 500 women in his harem. And then we come to the women in the Chandragupta society. We would never know what would have been the place of women in the time of Chandragupta Rajavamsa. All we have from the inscriptions is that Ashoka had appointed an Itijaka Mahamatra, the Mahamatra controlling women. We don't know whether It is like Minister of Women's Affairs today. Oh, he was only monitoring the women and whether he was really looking after the interests of the women or whether he was controlling them in any way, because women were not considered as equal as men. And there is no evidence except from the fictional records by Greek visitors and from Arthashastra, which may or may not have been written during the time of Chandra. If Ashoka's claims have shown respect and followed the teachings of the Buddha, he has never claimed to be a Buddha. How could he abandon his first wife, consort, and two children, and also maintain a harem? Is a question that remains unanswered. Based on all these writings, the woman would have been a slave, a commodity, temporary companion under a service provider such as Ganika Jaksaka, supervisor of prostitutes, according to Arthashastra, or an instrument of political intrigue and even an assassin, a Vishkanya, as mentioned in Rudrarakshasa of Vishakadatta. And women had been used for espionage. And women had always been used in some form or other just as a commodity or as something to be used and discarded. So that was the pathetic situation of the marginalized women in ancient India. And it would have continued for a long time. And even today, we observe it in some regions, sadly. And that is what we should try to learn from, and how we should encourage the women to stand on their own, because actually today the scientists believe that woman is higher evolved in the ladder of evolution than even man. That's why they have coined the term subspecies as Gyna sapiens. So it's time for women to come out, be uh, not allowed to be marginalized, and that is a lesson that our this seminar could carry to our young men and women, both the students of the college and for all who are listening to. Right? I'm trying to be brief because you are caught up with time issues. Thank you, and thank you.